COS shocking dismissal of janitor exposes hidden genius. You won't believe what happens next. Jack Thompson stood among the glass towers of Silicon Valley, feeling smaller than ever. The COS voice echoed through the sleek conference room, a cutting tone that sliced through the air like glass. And I regret to announce layoffs are necessary. Jack Thompson, our janitor, is among those eliminated. Whispers erupted, a tidal wave of disbelief washing over the crowd. Jack's heart sank as shame wrapped tightly around him, binding him to the floor. This was an emotional jab from which he hadn't expected to be reeling. Yet here he was, grappling with the dread of what lay ahead for him and Emily. For over a decade, he had pushed a broom and scrubbed floors, the rhythmic clattering almost a form of meditation amid the world of innovation surrounding him. No one had ever thought of him as anything but a janitor. The very title had felt like a handcuff, choking his dreams silently. Yet tucked beneath that blue uniform was a mind filled with bright ideas, a treasure trove of creativity that yearned to be set free. Suddenly he felt the weight of his life's choices crashing down, the education he had forsaken, the dreams he had buried in the dust of corporate corridors. Jack glanced at Emily, his daughter, seated in the back. Her wide, worried eyes held an ocean of potential, a spark of ambition that mirrored his younger self. What was he doing? The thrumming dread of inadequacy clawed at his throat. To see the ones you love suffer as a consequence of your failures, it was unbearable. What would he tell her? How could he confess to his own limitations when all she knew was her hopeful future? Lost in his whirlpool of despair, Jack's mind raced. He remembered the late-night study sessions, diving into the world of renewable energy and distant dreams. It was time to rekindle those aspirations, to fight against the odds and provide Emily with something better. Through a haze of self-doubt and the bitter taste of humiliation, Jack made a decision. He would enroll in community college, fight for every ounce of knowledge he could absorb. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determination surged as waking hours blurred into sleepless nights filled with textbooks and lectures, the caffeine fueling a newfound ambition. Memories of laughter shared with Emily in cramped apartments marked a rhythm that urged him onward. But as he honed his ideas, Jack learned the whispers had shifted, becoming urgent murmurs around the company. Rumors swirled that the CEO would unveil a project similar to what Jack envisioned, something he had fought through heartbreak and struggled to create. The shadows of doubt settled heavy on his shoulders. When the day came for the COS grand reveal, Jack faced a moral dilemma deeper than any he'd encountered. Should he confront the man who had dismissed him as though he mattered not? Or should he walk away, clutching his ideas and truth? The knowing smirk on the CEO's face during presentations felt like an assault on every janitor's dignity in the room. Jack held his breath, muscles tight, heart pounding in his chest, uncertainty flooding through him. Just as he hovered on the brink of voicing his revelation, the floodgates of self-preservation opened wide, leaving him paralyzed. Would he step out of the shadows and into the light, risking everything? Or would he allow fear to continue defining him? Jack had glimpsed what lay before him, a chance to forge a future not only for himself but for Emily. Yet amidst the haze of tension, strength and courage danced just out of reach, leaving him with unresolved questions that pressed down like shackles. With a deep breath, he prepared to step forth, his mind brimming with both dread and hope. The stakes couldn't be higher. The conference room felt suffocating, the air thick with anticipation as Jack wrestled with a maelstrom of emotions. Time constricted, each second stretching out like an eternity. He locked eyes with the CEO, a man cloaked in arrogance, unaware of the revolution brewing in Jack's heart. Suddenly, everything hung precariously on the edge of a decision he had never anticipated making. The memories of his past surged forth, reminding him of countless ideas abandoned in dark corners of his mind. He envisioned himself standing at his old janitorial cart after hours, scribbling notes in the dim light, dreaming of creating sustainable energy solutions, reworking waste management technologies, and even devising methods for reducing the carbon footprint of the very buildings that now looked down upon him. How could he dare to unleash those thoughts now? The notion of standing up, of shouting out the burning truth, threatened to engulf him with overwhelming fear. Yet the vulnerable gaze of Emily loomed large, casting aside the veil of doubt. Did he owe it to her to be brave? A loud voice inside him raged, demanding that he step forward. Yet another, quieter voice whispered that it would be safer to retreat. The paradox forced him to confront his inaction, compelling him to choose growth or the comfortable shackles of the familiar. Suddenly the scene around him sharpened. He couldn't let fear control the narrative of his life any longer. Jack felt an unfamiliar fire igniting within. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Emily, about showing her that dreams can manifest when met with relentless determination. With a newfound clarity, Jack took a step forward. The murmurs in the auditorium faded into silence as every eye shifted in his direction. He opened his mouth, words trembling like autumn leaves yet resolute. "Excuse me, I have something to share," he declared, his chest swelling with purpose. The COS smirk faltered, replaced by an air of curiosity tinged with disdain. Jack pressed on, disregarding the judgment in the room. It felt exhilarating, liberating as he detailed his ideas, solutions not just inspired by theory but rooted in experience. He spoke of efficiency, innovation, and a vision he had crafted over years of watching the world from below. Each word propelled him forward, breaking down the walls built around his identity. As he navigated through the intricate concepts, Jack could see the crowd's perceptions shifting. Expressions morphed from disbelief to intrigue. Distant conversations halted, and hushed murmurs circled the room, echoing possibilities that had long been dormant. This was his moment, a chance to rise, to disrupt the narrative that had bound him to the position of invisibility. When Jack's words finally trailed off, the silence was deafening. The COS expression flickered from irritation to contemplation. The weight of Jack's revelation hung in the room, a reflection of resilience and a plea for recognition. It felt as if time paused, holding its breath alongside the empathy brewing within the audience. Then, unexpectedly, a hand shot up from the back. It was Emily, eyes glistening with pride wide for all to see. "That's my dad," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. The statement broke the tension like glass shattering into sunlight. In that moment, Jack wasn't just a janitor. He was an innovator, a father, a dreamer refusing to be diminished. While applause erupted in waves, Jack felt the sudden pang of uncertainty again. Did this truly mark the dawn of a new chapter? Would the CEO embrace his vision, or would dismissal loom yet again? As the fervor of support flooded him, a lingering question hung precariously: had he truly turned the tide, or was it merely a fleeting illusion? The path ahead felt laden with both promise and peril, a crossroads where every choice could lead to unimaginable possibilities or bitter disappointment. Jack knew he was on the brink, a threshold waiting to be crossed. As the CEO approached him at the podium, Jack held his breath, the weight of hopes and fears collapsing underneath the gravity of the moment. Would this be an opportunity for collaboration, or would it mark another battle against the machine that discarded him? The possibilities crackled in the air, electric with potential. The CEO approached with an air of authority, his sharp suit contrasting starkly with Jack's simple work attire. Jack's heart drummed in his chest, each beat reverberating with the weight of expectation. The applause faded into a hushed murmur, the tension thick enough to cut steel. As the executive's piercing gaze settled on him, Jack felt both vulnerable and empowered. "Impressive presentation, Jack," the CEO began, his tone a blend of skepticism and intrigue. "But you must understand, this company has a specific direction, and we rarely deviate from our established strategies." The word struck like a blow, a reminder of his position in the corporate hierarchy. Yet, as the sting of rejection washed over him, a surprising surge of defiance ignited within. This was not just about perseverance. It was about affirming his worth in a world that had long regarded him as invisible. "Perhaps, but what if the future demands new strategies?" Jack countered, his voice steadier than he felt. "What if sticking to the old ways could lead us straight into obsolescence?" The CO's eyebrows lifted, a flicker of surprise coursing through the crowd. Jack's thoughts spiraled, realizing each word he uttered now risked further rejection. Still, he couldn't retract. Not while Emily's proud expression fueled him. "Let us be clear, Jack," the CEO replied, crossing his arms. "You've done well to share your ideas. Still, practical implementation often entails a distinct understanding of our budget and resources." Defiance wavering, Jack grappled with mounting frustration. The familiar specter of his old self whispered doubts. "Stick to your janitorial duties. What do you know of budgets?" He fought back, his determination sharper than the fear of inadequacy that sought to drag him down. "Practical solutions don't have to mean sacrificing innovation," Jack challenged, reclaiming his stance. He outlined an approach not only rooted in theoretical knowledge, but bolstered by first-hand experience. He spoke of attainable sustainability practices he had observed while cleaning, efficiencies waiting to be discovered that the higher-ups had neglected. As he spoke, he felt the tide beneath his feet shift, the initial dismissals turning into intrigued whispers. Jack's pulse quickened, the rhythm of hope intensifying. Each point he made was like a thread weaving his narrative into the company's very fabric, calling them to envision a future where their mission intersected with his vision. The COS guard began to lower, but Jack sensed something deeper still lingered. There were unseen barriers formed from years of loyalty to outdated practices. After what felt like an eternity, the CEO leaned back, evaluating him, lips pursed in thought. "Interesting ideas, but convincing the board to embrace change is another matter. I respect your passion, but we operate on a different plane." The dismissal stung, reminiscent of every past failure. Yet, something inside him refused defeat. He realized this wasn't just about his voice. It was about dismantling a system that stifled creativity and growth. "I'd like to prove it," he blurted out, unexpected confidence surging forth. "Invite me to a few strategy meetings. Let me show you what I can bring. This isn't just a pitch, it's a commitment." Jack's challenge hung in the air, heavy with implications. The crowd shifted, murmurings rising and falling like waves. In that moment, he understood that transformation was not a destination but a journey that began with risk. Even the risk of rejection. The CEO blinked, clearly taken aback. Jack had stepped beyond boundaries, igniting curiosity and caution alike. In that fleeting moment, Jack caught glimpses of potential acceptance, the faintest whisper that perhaps he could carve his space within this corporate fortress. As the room fell silent, Jack braced for the COS response, uncertainty gripping him once more. Would he entrust this janitor with a seat at the table? Or would his boldness lead him back into obscurity? Each possibility loomed like shadows, urging Jack to prepare for either triumph or a crushing defeat. The weight of the moment was heavy, but as he stood there, a new realization took shape. This was only the beginning. The stakes had never been higher, a threshold of potential stretching before him. And still, beneath the surface, the uncomfortable question lingered. Was he truly ready for what lay ahead? The silence stretched, taut and electric, forcing Jack to scan the room for any sign of his fate. The COS expression remained unreadable, the corners of his mouth fixed in a neutral line. Jack's heartbeat crashed in his ears as eyes flicked back and forth between him and their formidable leader. The CEO straightened in his chair, the atmosphere shifting with palpable tension. You understand that stepping into strategy meetings involves more than just gumption, Jack? It's a commitment to the company's future. And that's no small task. The challenge lingered in the air like the scent of burning rubber, stifling and alarmingly real. Exactly. That's why I want to be part of it, Jack replied, a fresh wave of determination washing over him. Every day I see how the operations could be optimized, but those insights have never been voiced. Allow me to bring them forward. The CEO leaned forward, contemplating, attention sharpening. The board will want evidence. They'll demand metrics, forecasts, and plans. Can you deliver that? Jack's mind raced. Metrics, forecasts, these had always been the stuff of distant corporate jargon. But something primordial sparked within him. All those years collecting data in unassuming ways, the frequency of cleaning supplies needed, the time wasted on inefficient processes, could he turn that into a coherent proposal? Let me prove I can, Jack replied, now channeling fervent hope into his words. I'll come up with a plan that generates actionable metrics. I'll analyze our current operations and identify cost-saving measures without compromising quality. Ambitious, the CEO murmured, nodding slowly, as if acknowledging the gravity of Jack's proposition. Yet the specter of self-doubt loomed. Could he truly put a proposal together? Enthusiasm alone wouldn't suffice. He needed to learn, adapt, and embrace the very systems he had once felt excluded from. Scrambling within his mind, Jack considered the overwhelming task he had signed up for, but felt an unexpected clarity forming. This was the perfect opportunity for growth in experimental arena where he wasn't just a janitor but a strategist shaping his own narrative. With each exchange, a new urgency propelled him forward. It was no longer merely about a seat at the table. It was about redefining who he was, a commitment to fully investing his abilities in a challenge that had previously felt insurmountable. The CEO finally offered a curt nod. "All right, you'll have 3 weeks. Present something convincing, or you'll return to your janitorial duties, no hard feelings." A surge of exhilaration rushed through Jack as he absorbed the offer. 3 weeks. The weight of the moment didn't portend inevitability. It was an invitation to revolutionize his self-image. A fire ignited within him, one that blazed with both excitement and trepidation. As the murmurs faded and the crowd dispersed, Jack found solace in the swirling thoughts taking form in his mind. He was no longer just cleaning up messes. He was facing a critical challenge that offered uncharted territory filled with possibilities. This was not merely about what the company could gain from his insights, but about what he could uncover in himself, hidden capabilities and strengths previously suppressed by his role. As he exited the boardroom, the voices of doubt were pushed to the background. Jack felt a strange sense of exhilaration. The looming deadline wasn't an obstacle but a catalyst for change. It was within reach now. Creativity and quantifiable outcomes could collide. He scribbled a few key ideas on a notepad, the ink bleeding with promise, one thought rushing in to replace another. But the weight of an unsure future crept back, gnawing at him like a shadow that would not release its hold. Could he really transform his ideas into something tangible and persuasive in just 3 weeks? Every scenario flashed through his mind as he traversed the hallway, nerves dancing with anticipation. Each moment teetered between exhilaration and anxiety. With his mind racing through strategies and possibilities, he entered the break room, the familiar scent of coffee both grounding and energizing. Jack pulled out his phone, determined to connect with Emily, the voice that had guided him along this precarious path. But as he dialed, a new thought struck. What if the board were opposed to his ideas? How would he respond? The prospect of direct confrontation with the old guard loomed. An inevitable clash between innovation and tradition was brewing. Would he stand firm against the tide of resistance? His fate and the company's hung in a delicate balance, the time drawing closer to face the storm head-on. The hum of the break room faded as Jack clenched his phone, staring blankly at the screen. His heart raced, a discordant mix of hope and doubt. Emily had always been his sounding board, someone whose insights uncloaked the shadows of his uncertainties. He needed her guidance now more than ever, but the thought of disappointing her weighed heavily on him. "Come on, Jack," he muttered to himself, inhaling deep to quell his nervous energy. What was he afraid of? The outcome rested in his hands. He had 3 weeks to foster ideas that could transform the company's future and his own. Wasn't that enough to make the call? Finally, he pressed the call button. As she picked up and her familiar voice poured into his ear, he felt an anchor in the stormy sea of his thoughts. "Emily, I got a shot at a strategy meeting." The excitement was palpable, but underlying it lay the weight of the impending challenge. "But the CEO isn't gonna make this easy." "Jack, that's fantastic. What are you thinking?" Her enthusiasm enveloped him, almost like a protective shield against self-doubt. "I have to put together metrics and a proposal within 3 weeks, he admitted, his voice tightening with insecurity. "I'm worried that I might not know enough to convince them. What if they dismiss my ideas?" There was a brief pause. "What have you learned from working your shifts? Start there. You've got insights they wouldn't even think to consider. Just because they have the titles doesn't mean they know the on-ground realities." What she said struck a chord with him. Each night spent mopping the floors and emptying trash had granted him a unique perspective. He had seen firsthand the redundancies, the inefficiencies, and the gleaming opportunities tucked away in the company's daily operations. All that data he had quietly collected over the years, maybe it was more valuable than he had ever realized. "Right," he said, ruminating on her words. "I need to think about how to present what I've observed, what I know. That will give me a framework." "Exactly." Just remember, your role has given you a lens that they don't have. Use that, she encouraged, infusing a sense of purpose into his uncertainty. Jack felt a renewed sense of direction. This time it was not just about being a janitor but about taking charge of the narrative. He began to outline a mental picture of his proposal, focusing on the problems he had encountered and their potential solutions. The transformation he sought was beginning to solidify. After hanging up, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in a mindset of resilience. He jotted down a list of observations that flowed through his mind: areas where tasks ran long, supplies consistently ran low, and where time could be better allocated. He needed numbers to back his observations, tangible metrics coupled with innovative thinking. With every item he wrote down, the nervous energy shifted into a relentless drive. Jack was awakening capabilities he had long buried beneath the weight of expectation and self-doubt. Hours sped by as he researched industry standards, sought out similar case studies, and crafted outlines that mirrored the structure of successful proposals he had studied online. Yet beneath this newfound industriousness, the shadow of anticipated backlash loomed. What if his insights were shot down? What if he faced ridicule from those who only saw him as the janitor? The fear gnawed at him, but the excitement of potential triumph was intoxicating. This was his moment, a golden key to the door of self-affirmation. As he meticulously assembled his proposal over the next few days, it became evident that confidence and self-advocacy were intertwined. Each new statistic reinforced a sense of empowerment. But as the week drew to a close, Jack realized he still had not confronted his biggest mental blockade: the moment he would have to present his ideas to the board, facing the skepticism that could just as easily follow as the approval he sought. He entered a critical moment of reckoning. Was he ready to stand in front of the stalwarts of the company, risking everything built through years of hard work? The tension climbed as he prepared to unveil the man behind the mop, and the insights hidden beneath layers of compliance. The clock was ticking, an echo of fate urging him to prove that he was more than met the eye. Just as he was coming to terms with the impending confrontation, a notification pinged on his phone. A reminder for the first board meeting of the series, just 3 days away. An internal voice urged him forward. It was now or never. Jack clenched his fists, the struggle looming. Would he rise to meet or shrink in the face of tradition? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack sat at his kitchen table. A mound of notes and sketches spread before him. The clock relentlessly ticked on the wall, the seconds echoing like a reminder of his dwindling time. With the board meeting looming just 2 days away, anxiety surged through him, filling the space around him with an almost palpable tension. The proposal he had crafted felt both like a lifeline and a shackle. He was as excited as he was terrified. In his mind he replayed Emily's voice, her encouragement still ringing clear. He needed to confront the doubts that had shadowed him for so long. The question surfaced again. Could he truly transform from the janitor into the credible strategist he aspired to be? He thought back to the daily rhythms at the office: the clatter of keyboards, the constant hum of conversation, the bustling movements of executives and staff. They were immersed in their roles, often brushing past him without acknowledgement. Yet now, as he prepared to step into their world, the divide felt monumental. He was aware of how quickly recognition could be eroded by existing perceptions. What if he was nothing more than a fleeting curiosity, an anomaly in their fixed structures? Jack's fingers danced over his notes. He had harnessed insights others overlooked, and he now had to share that visibility with an audience that might only see his uniform. The realization struck him with clarity. If he didn't demonstrate value, he would risk being written off entirely. This was no longer just about the proposal, it was about his very identity within the company. He needed to assert his place at the table, which meant embracing the unfamiliar and stepping into an empowered version of himself. As he organized his thoughts, he began scripting his speech, carefully crafting each word so it would resonate with the board members. Passion surged within him like a fire as he wrote about systems he had witnessed breaking down, and the fresh solutions he could present. The enthusiasm began to drown out his doubts, fueling a conviction that sought to shatter his long-standing insecurities. This was about more than just efficiency, it was about revitalizing the organization from the ground up. Yet, with every strike of the pen, an inner voice flickered doubts. What if this was all in vain? What if the CEO dismissed his insights with a wave and a scoff? Jack recognized that the fear of failure was insidious, whispering doubts that threatened to undermine his preparation. He could almost hear the laughter of an imagined audience echoing in his mind, degrading him to a mere performer in a circus of suits. Breaking away from the spiraling negativity, Jack took a deep breath and called upon a mental strategy that Emily had advised him to employ: grounding in the present. He focused on the tangible fact that he was the one holding the pen, shaping the narrative of his career. It was an exercise in self-affirmation. Rather than dwelling on potential rejection, he decided to visualize success, picturing how the board would lean in, intrigued as he unveiled a missing piece of the puzzle they had never noticed. Game face on, he set his sights on the window. Night had cloaked the sky outside, but the glow of the city lights illuminated his determination. Tonight he was not just visualizing a momentary triumph. He was preparing to shift the landscape of his life. He would face the board not as a janitor searching for validation, but as a competent individual ready to contribute. The transformation was not just about impressing others. It was about channeling the years of experience he had gathered into a meaningful proposition. As Jack polished his presentation, an unexpected thought crept in. The recommended changes within his proposal could also lead to career advancement for others. Opportunities created not just for him, but for his colleagues who worked tirelessly yet remained in the shadows. This flicker inspired a profound drive that rekindled his sense of purpose. He was ready to elevate others alongside himself, crafting a legacy that would extend beyond just personal ambition. Just as he was wrapping up, a new notification pinged on his phone. A message from Emily, a reminder of the mentorship they studied together. The clock was ticking, the deadline of the presentation drawing near. The time had come for the final rehearsal, offering one last chance to prepare for the storm ahead. Jack glanced back at his scattered notes, resolved to shake off the doubts that had clung to him. It was now or never. He had to confront the CEO directly. Would Jack's insights not only stand up to scrutiny, but spark a revolution within the company's stagnant practices? He couldn't know what awaited him, but it was a risk worth taking. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was the moment that would redefine everything. The morning of the meeting arrived with unyielding urgency. Jack's stomach twisted as he sat in the conference room, the echoes of his past reverberating through the sleek glass walls. The breath of the suited executives filled the air with electric anticipation, and yet amidst the sterile environment, he felt an uncanny sense of strangeness. A janitor in a sea of polished resumes. Yet he wasn't just there to clean today. He was armed with a vision. He rehearsed the opening lines in his mind, iterations of the words swimming through him like a warm current, fluctuating between confidence and a chilling wave of dread. He adjusted his tie, a visual symbol of his commitment to this self-reinvention. This attire felt foreign, yet empowering. It didn't mean he was pretending to be someone else. It represented his readiness for transformation, and a way to bridge his past with his emerging identity. As each board member entered, Jack watched them closely. Their mannerisms, the nuances of expression that defined them. He had observed these executives in their routines, their decisions, the unexamined details of how they operated within the corporation. Notes he'd taken quietly over the years became tangible as he faced them now. He wasn't just a witness to their actions. He was armed with insightful critiques that they desperately needed. When the meeting commenced, Jack stole a glance around the table. The CEO sat directly across, a figure of authority. That pivotal gaze sent ripples of doubt through him. Was he truly ready? He felt exposed, yet the moment was also an invitation, an opportunity to demonstrate that his unique perspective was not just a novelty, but a necessary asset. Taking a steadying breath, Jack launched into his presentation. The nerves twisted, but he drew strength from the memory of Emily's support. He spoke not just about facts, but about understanding the intricate workings of the company from the ground level. He addressed inefficiencies that had permeated operations with a conviction fueled by his hands-on experience. As his voice steadied, the atmosphere shifted. Heads turned, expressions softened, and he could see curiosity flickering in the eyes of some. This was the validation he sought, not the fleeting acknowledgement as a janitor, but as an essential component of the enterprise. Yet, just as he approached a critical recommendation, the CEO interrupted with an almost dismissive tone. And how do you think a janitor could possibly understand the complexities of our operations better than trained professionals? The word struck Jack like a thunderbolt. For a moment, the room fogged with the heavy weight of disbelief. He could feel the breath of doubt creeping back in, a familiar specter whispering, maybe he's right. Maybe you don't belong here. But just as quickly, Jack wrestled back his composure. The internal struggle played out like a frantic game of tug-of-war. What if this was the confrontation he had been preparing for? He could feel the stakes rising, tightening around him like a vice. From the depths of his gut came an unexpected strength, a desire to assert his rightful place. I may have started at the bottom, but I've seen things that you might overlook from the top, he replied, grounding his voice with a calm firmness. The janitor has a unique vantage point. I witness the daily struggles that affect our bottom line. I'm not here just to provide a report. I'm here with insights rooted in reality. His heart raced, yet he pushed forward, confident that each word carried weight. There was a moment, a collective breath held in the room, the tension palpable. Would the board members recognize the truth in his perspective? Or would the CEO's skepticism overshadow everything? As Jack concluded, he felt adrenaline coursing through his veins, mingling with both dread and exhilaration. He had faced the gauntlet of dismissal and stood tall. But would this moment impact the company? Would it resonate with the members seated before him? He held on to that question as they began their deliberations, each second stretching, weaving uncertainty into the fabric of his resolve. Today the outcome felt uncertain, but he had staked his claim in a way that could irrevocably change his trajectory. Jack had ventured into the room as a janitor but was determined to leave recognized as a strategist. Would his bold response ignite a spark of change within the corporate hierarchy, or would he be swept back into the shadows? Only time would tell as the waiting began. The deliberations dragged on, an agonizing silence filling the air that thickened with every passing second. Jack sat motionless, acutely aware of how every gaze shifted back and forth around the table, each whisper a cruel reminder of the power dynamics at play. Was his bold response compelling enough to earn their respect, or would it dissolve into the cacophony of corporate skepticism? With every ticking second, his mind became a storm of thoughts. That moment of vulnerability when he had stood up to the CEO echoed through him. It felt different than his usual way of handling conflict, a departure from the diligent compliance he had practiced for years. While he couldn't escape the fear of being dismissed, he also couldn't ignore the spark of pride that ignited within. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about carving out a space where he didn't have to fit someone else's mold. As the executives engaged in hushed conversation, Jack unfolded the small notes he'd hidden in his pocket. Each scribble was a reflection of what he had observed, minor inefficiencies that plagued their operations regularly. He had worked closely within those systems, and while his experience had often been overshadowed by his title, it had also developed an acute understanding of what was necessary for improvement. The CEO's dismissive challenge had been expected, a rite of passage that many face in the corporate arena. Yet, Jack realized it had served as a catalyst, fueling a newfound determination. He pulled from his emotions, channeling the myriad experiences he had collected into a single moment, where he could choose to either retreat or reassert himself. He could feel how the adrenaline from earlier buoyed his spirits, anchoring him in a resolve that was both surprising and liberating. A board member finally broke the silence, their voice sharp yet tinged with curiosity. Is there actual merit to your suggestions? What do you believe we should prioritize? Jack took a deep breath. Every nerve in his body seemed to hum with energy as he structured his response. He had anticipated this moment, and instead of receiving it with trepidation, he embraced it. We need to focus on the communication channels across departments. There's a disconnect that creates inefficiencies, issues that could be resolved simply through effective dialogue. I've dealt with the staff who are the wheels beneath the machine, and they have a wealth of feedback that can refine our shortcomings. Each word he uttered felt like a brick laid down in the foundation he was building. With every nod from one of the board members, each flicker of intrigue in their eyes, Jack expanded his narrative. He highlighted concrete examples, grounding his message in reality rather than abstract notions. The energy shifted as Jack captured the room's attention. The dynamic had transformed. He was no longer just the outsider, he was part of a conversation that was pivotal to the company's future. Then the CEO leaned forward, an eyebrow raised. But without the right background, can we really trust these perspectives? Experience counts for a lot in this industry. The skepticism oozed through his words, but Jack felt a rush of clarity. The challenge was no longer daunting, it was invigorating. I understand the value of theoretical expertise, but that's only half the battle. The reality of our operations is raw and chaotic. And who better to address that than someone who sees it develop firsthand daily? Feeling the ripple of support from other board members emboldened him. He maintained eye contact with the CEO, even as he felt the pounding of his heart race. If you want to connect with your core operations, I invite you to walk the floor with me, observe the everyday actions and decisions. You'll discover what we can change and how I can help implement those changes effectively. The CEO's expression had shifted, his skepticism briefly overshadowed by intrigue. Jack could sense the battle of minds brewing, the room charged with momentum. But Jack's journey was only beginning. Every question raised and statement made opened a new avenue for growth, both personally and professionally. As the meeting wrapped, Jack emerged with more than just confidence. He had ignited a discussion, a thread within this corporate tapestry that could lead to something transformative. But in the back of his mind lingered the thought, what sacrifices would he need to make to maintain this newfound momentum? How far was he willing to go to challenge the status quo? The answer hung precariously in the air, an intoxicating mixture of anticipation and trepidation, as he stepped out into the world beyond those glass walls. Would his initiatives continue to take root, or was it merely the beginning of a battle where the victor could be determined by those unyielding in their power? The days following the meeting felt tumultuous yet charged with potential. Jack arrived at the office each morning with a purpose, revitalized by the realization that he could no longer hide behind his title. He felt like a diver emerging from murky waters, liberated from the constraints that had long held him back. The experience of defiance against the CEO had crystallized something within him, a burgeoning determination that demanded manifestation. He spent hours pacing the floor, observing interactions between different departments. With every encounter, he noticed threads of inefficiency, moments when miscommunication led to confusion and frustration. The workplace operated like a series of gears, some rusty and others misaligned. Each afternoon he scribbled notes, not just for himself but for the team, a testament to what could be improved if they only were willing to listen. But the deeper he delved, the more daunting his realizations became. Each barrier to effective communication, he documented, seemed to reflect something more profound about the culture itself, an atmosphere steeped in hierarchy and entrenched methodologies that stifled innovation. Jack felt the weight of responsibility. He didn't merely want to suggest changes, this was about altering the core of how they operated. During one of his lunch breaks, he found himself sitting alone, a patch of sunlight filtering through the windows. He recognized that he had embarked on a journey that would force him to question every belief he held about the corporate world. It ignited conflicting emotions. Could he challenge the status quo without alienating himself from those around him? Would his changes foster resentment among entrenched staff or empower them? His thoughts were interrupted by Sarah, a colleague from the marketing department. She walked over, a mix of curiosity and caution painted across her face. "I heard you stood up to the CEO. That was bold." Her voice carried an air of admiration that Jack found both encouraging and disconcerting. He attempted to brush it off. "I just spoke up about the things I observe. We should hold ourselves accountable." "Accountable?" she repeated, her brow furrowed in thought. "That doesn't sound like a safe path. You're treading on some toes, Jack. And if it goes wrong, well, it can get messy." Her words sunk deep. The prospect of isolation loomed large, but he refused to be deterred. "But if not now, when?" he countered. "There's too much at stake here, Sarah. We either adapt and evolve or we risk becoming obsolete." The conversation lingered in his mind as he returned to his desk. For the first time, Jack grappled with the notion that challenging authority didn't merely carry the risk of failure. It also demanded a willingness to navigate the complexities of human relationships. Power dynamics were intricately woven, and with every step he took toward meaningful dialogue, he felt the pull of opposition lurking in the shadows. In the coming days, he set to work crafting a proposal that could serve as a springboard for change, a structured plan that highlighted his observations alongside actionable recommendations. It was ambitious, maybe even reckless, but he was invigorated by the possibilities. He pored over statistics, gathering data that corroborated his ideas, convinced that numbers could fortify an argument where emotions might cave. Yet, even as he drew closer to finalizing his plan, a gnawing fear bubbled within him. What if his proposal set off a wave of resentment? There was a fine line between revolutionary change and insurrection, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that ambition tethered him to a tightrope, with perilous risks on either side. Decisions loomed large, brewing visions of the future, where his contributions could either shift paradigms or get lost in the shadows of traditionalism. As he stared at the computer screen, contemplating his next steps, the potential fallout weighed on him like a chain. Would the risk be worth the possible rewards, or was he merely setting himself up for the ultimate downfall? With the draft proposal nearly complete, conviction replaced hesitation. How he framed his intentions and addressed the inevitable pushback would be pivotal. Steeling himself for what lay ahead, Jack readied for the confrontation that awaited him. It was time to face the resistance that had long haunted the corridors of the office. As he prepared to present his ideas, he couldn't help but ponder. Was he truly ready to embrace the most radical aspects of his vision? The moment had come to not just shift his career, but potentially redefine the culture around him. Would he rise as a leader, or would he find himself locked out, ostracized for his audacity? The boardroom felt different today. An unfamiliar energy buzzed in the air as Jack entered with a folder full of proposals in hand. He stood taller. A profound transformation had occurred. The man who once swept the floors behind the shadows of polished suits emerged into the light, ready to confront an institution that had underestimated him for too long. He recalled how he had felt just weeks ago, shackled to the modest title of janitor. That man feared ridicule. Today, he was armed with the realization that his experiences were not mere footnotes but significant insights that required validation. The fear that had clawed at him would no longer direct the narrative of his life. He would embrace authentic self-advocacy. Jack opened the folder, revealing clarity within chaos. Each page contained observations transformed into concrete proposals. He discovered inefficiencies in supply chain management, outdated practices in resource allocation, and overlooked employee feedback loops. Each insight had been substantiated by data he had meticulously gathered during his shifts, while he swept and cleaned, asking questions no one else saw fit to ask. As the executives filed in, he saw familiar faces juxtaposed with those of authority. Today they represented a pivotal scale on which his future balanced. Resolutely, he presented his observations, detailed proposals, and strategies to redefine their operational structure. He painted a picture of potential, how their environmental impact could decrease significantly with innovative waste management practices. He suggested practices he had dreamt of from his cart. He stood before the powers that had once cast him into invisibility, and now watched closely, a spark igniting a dialogue that shifted the corporate narrative. What astonished him wasn't just the feedback he received, but the transformation in himself. He was respected not as a janitor, but as an individual armed with profound realizations based on years of fluent immersion in their world. "Jack, these are ambitious," the CEO remarked, his tone laced with both skepticism and realization. "Metrics look good on paper, but this isn't easy to execute." Jack didn't back down. "I appreciate the challenge, but I believe overlooking operational insights can lead us down a path of obsolescence. I've lived the day-to-day more intimately than most, and I see opportunities for tangible improvement. What we can accomplish together is greater than individual effort." He saw the CEO's guarded expression begin to soften as he continued, weaving together compelling data with passionate elucidation. The room shifted from surface-level engagement to a deeper level of contemplation. He had taken the risk, confronting the conventional ideologies of authority, and somewhere in that tension, respect blossomed. During a brief silence that followed his speech, he turned and caught a glimpse of Emily through the glass wall, her eyes alight with pride. It ignited something deeper within him, the realization that this moment wasn't just about career advancement, but sending ripples of change into other lives, perhaps sparking their own inspiration for profound transformation. Mr. Thompson, one of the board members, chimed in. "In a world where adaptability is crucial, you certainly have the ear of the ground floor. How well do you think we can integrate your insights into actionable strategies?" It was an acknowledgement that echoed the growth he had nurtured over the past few weeks, a manifestation of resilience and recognizing his value. Together with a neatly crafted plan that included timelines, expected outcomes, and metrics for success, he envisioned a collaboration that would elevate not just himself but the entire organization. The board discussions ricocheted around the table, igniting conversations about feasibility, innovative practice integration, workforce training, and outreach strategies. Jack felt the pulse of a collective awakening. The room turned into a forge, molding potentiality into reality. His proposals transformed into foundational changes that everyone believed in collectively. Days later, as he stood in the break room once again, holding a mug of coffee with a smile, the atmosphere felt fundamentally altered. Jack wasn't just a janitor, nor was he just a troublesome newcomer. He had evolved into an advocate for change, a strategist on the rise, and coworkers now murmured his name with respect and recognition. Then Jack received an email announcing a company-wide meeting to present the changes and, more importantly, his team had been invited to collaborate on the transition. Reflecting on how far he had come in a short time left him almost breathless. This was a defining moment, validation far deeper than he had dared to dream. As he looked to the future, there was no more space for thoughts of solitude or limitation. Jack had conquered his greatest barriers, seized the opportunities that lay ahead, and stood proud as a representation of what was possible when persistence met passion. He had transformed not just himself but the organization, showing that every voice deserved to be heard, and every mind held the potential for innovation. With a steady resolve, he made a vow to keep pushing boundaries, to venturing forth as not just a janitor, but as an architect of change, an advocate for the overlooked, and a father showing his daughter that courage indeed can achieve wonderful things. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to catch more inspiring stories of personal evolution. Don't wait even one more second. Leave a like now to keep this message alive for others. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Jack's journey. And if you know someone who needs this kind of motivation, share instantly with at least 5 friends. Join the movement of personal empowering transformation.